Some experts say that the average cost of a mid-level manager mishire is 15 times annual base salary on average. And the cost, it only increases the longer that person stays in the role. May sound outrageous, but in fact it may even be greater negative impact as today's rapidly changing and intensely competitive marketplace has disrupted what for decades was a pretty routine process. Today, more than ever in history, people, the good ones you hire and the bad ones you mishire, are the real game changers. In the past, a bad hire, well, it only performed below your expectations. Today, it could be crucially damaging to an entire organization's competitive survival. Greetings, everyone, and welcome from the Technology Association of Georgia. It's Friday, February 26, 2016, and this is Tech Talk. I'm your host, Frank Baia. Up to the Tech Talk, the new way to competitively recruit in the innovation economy, where experts agree that knowing your company's overall mission and goals, identifying the talent needed to achieve those goals, and the current structure of your organization are all fundamental when it comes to identifying not just a single hire, but also developing an entire team. The Tech Talk explores the difference between human investment versus human resources, as we discover a new way to competitively recruit. Guiding our exploration is a former global executive in Fortune 500 companies, serial entrepreneur, and successful business advisor with a proven record of change-making results, Jim Villwock, CEO and founder of Human Investment Advisory, an industry-leading consulting and solutions company that helps clients to improve revenue, profit, and competitiveness through closing the gap between the CEO board and their human investments. The time has come to get real about recruiting and adapting your organization to the ever-evolving demands and opportunities of today's and tomorrow's global economy. Success is all about recruiting, and the reality that it all comes down to whether or not you view it as a frustrating challenge or a sustained strategy advantage. The how and where and the why, hiring and retaining the best, is an environment that fosters team relationships, must be a company-wide commitment where results are measured by the steps necessary to implement a process to competitively recruit as a strategic objective. As we speak with the former global executive and business advisor, CEO and founder of Human Investment Advisory, Jim Villwock. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Jim, welcome to Tech Talk.
Thank you, Frank. Looking forward to talking with you and, of course, the audience.
Well, I tell you what, I think our listening audiences are going to get some real thought leadership and really some, I think, strong tips as far as the competitive environment as it relates, obviously, to recruiting. Let's talk a little bit about the area in general. Give us an idea of the landscape, if you will, as far as just the overall competitive challenges that are faced by most companies with recruiting today.
Well, particularly in technology, I think Tino says this well. You have probably 5 to 10 times more job opportunities than you do people eligible for those opportunities. So this is vast. It includes STEM and a lot of other categories. So the challenge for the company is in that environment, which is the buyer's market, how do I find the best and brightest versus the competition?
And there is a formula that you can actually establish that? I mean, is it a case where, I know there's systems that have worked before. I think one of the cliches is a man can call it experience when he's been making the same mistake over and over again. Obviously, when you don't get the results you need, you're going to have to make some changes. But I guess over a period of time, you begin to define what does work. Is there a formula?
Yes, but the difference is the formula doesn't come from the community of recruiting. It comes from traditional strategic business thought leadership that ask fundamental business questions, and that includes sales, marketing, other categories, which is really what we're doing here. If you look at recruiting, think of it as reverse selling. And you're trying in a buyer's market to get those who are available to want to choose you versus the competition. You have to let them know why they should do that.
Okay, so maybe go in a little bit deeper than that, because obviously I think of a number of cliches across my mind that say, you know, the solution is simple, it's the implementation that's hard. How do you do that?
Well, we have 5 major ways of approaching that, and they're all incremental, but the first one, the most important one, is to look at recruiting as how am I going to market the company and the positions so that the audience becomes emotionally hooked and interested in wanting to learn more. And then in the interview process, how am I going to sell the candidates truthfully, not trying to make things up, as to why they should really want to work here. That's number one. And the way you do that is you start off working with the marketing and sales organization to understand on a company-wide basis what's the value proposition, why are we in business, and why should anybody be excited, and then putting that on the job description in a very brief way so that all of a sudden you're marketing to everyone who's looking at that job description. I'm willing to bet that most of those listening don't do that.
Really? Well, I think obviously part of the evolution of so many of the classic C-suite corporate positions has changed so radically over the years that, well, HR was kind of a process. It's actually, as you're pointing out, it becomes a holistic effort that really has to be part of the overall branding, strategy, positioning, marketing, all of the other things that happen within an organization. Correct? And let me continue. You were in the middle of going through some points.
Well, let me just add to that. I also include procurement because recruiting is really the same as procurement. You're going out and you're sourcing the best of breed supplier. In this case, the supplier happens to be an individual who's going to work for you. So whether it's a third party or you hire them as a 1099 or as a W-2, fundamentally the process needs to be the same. And the way you look at it competitively, strategically, is how do you go about finding in a competitive marketplace, not commodities, but those who are strategically the best fit to maximize your growth of the company. So that's why it needs to be strategic. It needs to be at the C-suite discussion to define what is it that we're going to use to attract them. Now, the second thing, again at the C-suite, usually the CEO and the board, very often when they look at their people, they look at them and they assume that the managers and HR and everybody else will just do what is best. The reality is there needs to be leadership and direction. That can only come from the board and the CEO and ultimately the C-suite. The first thing to do then is to define what is the business, what's the vision of that business, what they're trying to accomplish, what's the culture. Most people talk culture, but the culture needs to be created that matches the business competitively. So everything is how to compete in the business, how to grow revenue, profit, and market share. Then to define the values. So, for example, one culture is being treated as a commodity. Would you like to work as a number? Or if you're looking at the people, I ask CEOs, if you're paying salaries and benefits every month, are they a commodity or are they an investment? And if an investment, what's the ROI and increasing value you're getting from your investment portfolio? Now, that language speaks to the CEO. Not everybody in the organization understands what I just said, but if they look at their own personal financial investments, then they can understand exactly what I just said. So if your culture is looking about how do I help them to generate that ROI, which helps them to succeed in the job and growing up in their career, we're on a whole different page than treating them like a disposable, fungible commodity. Next, you look at the values. What values does the company have? Not just values that are on a wall, sheet of paper, but you define them in such a way that unequivocally that no matter what country people come from, what culture, what racial background, what religious background, that these words are defined so clearly that we're all on the same page. And most of the time, if I'm looking for a job where I can perform, I want to know that if I'm performing hard work, honesty, and results, I'll get rewarded for it. Because in most companies, that's not necessarily how those companies work. If you as a executive team decide that's what you want to do as part of your value system, you got to communicate it. That differentiates you from everybody else. And will attract those who like those definitions, and it won't attract those who don't, which is good. You won't have to worry about those who don't qualify. And the last major definition is called common cause. This is something most people have never heard of before. But today, the millennials want to hear this, and that is, what beyond the company are we doing to change the world? Now, you may say, making widgets doesn't change the world. Okay, where do those widgets go? You have to go through the process and boil it down to, here's how we're impacting positively the world, and you're playing a part of that. So now you not only have emotionally engaged, but they see how they can leave a legacy and how what they're doing really matters. It's a lot more than just getting the paycheck every week.
Well, I think as you describe it, first off, is I think of first-generation entrepreneurs, the people that began most of the business, started with that kind of value structure, started with that kind of philosophy, and as time has gone on and they become more successful and the organization grows and grows and grows, they may delegate a lot of responsibilities, including the communication and the actual creation of the environment that you're talking about. So I think it's really a kind of a good reminder, going all the way back to even an interview with a single individual, to go back to some of those first-generational characteristics that say we are doing this not only to make money, but we're doing this for a common good, and we want to do it in a way that's honorable, trustworthy, and clearly performing competitiveness, but doing it for the right reasons. Let's reverse the role a little bit here and talk about the fact that a lot of the millenniums, a lot of the potential prospects are getting sharper. And I think they're even understanding that some of these steps that we're talking about need to be really clearly processes that are engaged in the business, engaged with the company, and really are what they say they are, because maybe just per chance that you're going to hurt your possibilities of recruiting if, in fact, the interviewee doesn't really see it as trusting and believable. So maybe, I guess, as we wrap up the conversation, I guess my question is, you can't just walk the walk, I guess, is where I'm going, and can that be instilled as you need the individual, or do you need to be working on that now and develop that first, or how does that all work in terms of transforming into this new landscape and new environment?
Very simply, it has to be proactively defined at the CEO and board level what they want to do, and that's then part of a new policy. Think about if you're going to make an investment in your own personal financial portfolio, you define the criteria of what you want to invest in and how. In large corporations, they have to make a policy out of this at the board level. So you can only invest or borrow depending upon those definitions defined by the board. That includes investment grade ratings and diversification, these things. Mm-hmm. When you're dealing with people, it's different definitions, but this needs to be defined at that level and then implemented, communicated, and enforced throughout the company, where if you want an exception to this defined policy, that's okay. But just like a financial exception, you have to go up the chain for approval by the executive who has that authority, so that individual managers can no longer do what's right in their own eyes or do what may be politically expedient to their agenda, but it has to conform to what supports the business. That's what we focus on as a company primarily, is we're a strategic consulting company. Recruiting is one of the areas that we look at, but until you define these things at the top, everything else doesn't really flow properly.
Well, it's funny because it kind of segues into my obvious question, and we are running quickly out of time, but can the human resource officer do that? I mean, if he finds himself in a situation, or she does, and the reality is what we're describing, and the performance criteria is on his shoulders or her shoulders to find the right people, yet the atmosphere isn't doing the kinds of steps that you say need to be done, what's the next step for that HR guy? Does he go to the board? Does he look for someone that he can partner with, like yourself? I mean, what is the next step for someone who wants to change that environment?
There's several options. Usually when we come as a company, it's with the CEO. But if HR approaches us, we understand politics and what they may be facing. So we have tactical solutions that literally can reduce the cost of recruiting by 30 to 80%,
wow.
Can take the timeline of getting prospects to look at them from weeks and months to 5 minutes, so you can engage them much earlier before the competition. Don't just use the resume database and use keywords. We have a process that assesses them and looks at, rank everybody, 100% of those who apply, who really is the most competent and best fit. And then you start with the top 5 or 20 of those, however many you want, as a slate. You do your normal HR reviews because, unfortunately, half of resumes lie. And then this also touches on a lot of other ways of assessing them so you have the highest quality, much faster, it lowers the risk, and in general, these people stay longer in the company as well. So that's one example. We have 2 others. One says most people in a company don't like what they're doing. Fine. We have an assessment that helps you define behaviorally if they're a best fit in the role on the team that they're playing, job specific, and then the next one is, are they really a team player, or are they all about themselves? Now, it depends on the company culture as to which one might be selected.
Right.
But if you're a high-growth IT company, most of the time your lower risk is to go with those who are team players because they're also willing to help cross-functionally and help others be successful. They believe that that's part of how you get that common cause, and that becomes part of the process. And then when they're onboarded, there's a lot of other things that we can help with, such as how does that employee now learn how they can become personally successful. And it's a roadmap of steps where they learn how to develop themselves as a product, market themselves, and sell themselves in the company through advisors. It's a very integrated program that we offer. So to answer your question to an HR executive, if the politics doesn't let you go to the C-suite, we can help you have major improvements tactically that you can measure, and all of a sudden you're going to get attention in the right way because the hiring managers who have a high-quality slate of candidates, quickly, they're going to realize that it's far more efficient. They're getting the right people, and you're not wasting their time, which for managers, I've been an executive where I've often had slates that were a waste of my time. And all of this together can help them be far more efficient.
Human Investment Advisory. Listen to you talk, Jim. It obviously is not only the name of the firm, but it's a mission and a solution. Thanks for taking a few minutes from your busy schedule to join us for a few minutes today on Tech Talk and give us some insights into these changes.
It's my pleasure. Have a great day.